For thousands of people, Jim Jones wasn't just a preacher. He was a man who promised equality in a world divided by race. A man who claimed he could heal the sick. A man who said he was building a community where everybody could be safe, accepted, and cared for. To his followers, he wasn't simply a pastor. He was hope. But hope can become dangerous when it belongs to only one person. In the 1950s, Jim Jones founded what became known as the People's Temple. At first, many saw it as a progressive church. It welcomed people of different races at the time when segregation and discrimination were still widespread in the United States. Members volunteered in their communities, cared for those in need, and believed they were part of something bigger than themselves. The church grew quickly. So did Jones' influence. Followers were encouraged to trust him completely. Some believed he possessed supernatural abilities. Others believed he was a prophet. Over time, questioning him became more difficult, and loyalty became more important than independent thought. As criticism of the church increased, Jones told his followers that the outside world was becoming too dangerous. He spoke of conspiracies, enemies, and persecution. The only solution, he claimed, was to leave America behind. Deep in the jungles of Guyana and South America, they would build a new society, a paradise, or so they believed. Hundreds of men, women, and children packed their belongings and said goodbye to their families and traveled thousands of miles into the rainforest. What they found wasn't paradise. It was isolation. And once they arrived, leaving became nearly impossible. The settlement was called Jonestown. Hidden deep inside the dense jungles of Guyana, it was more than 100 miles from the nearest major town. Thick rainforests surrounded the community, and only practical ways in and out were by small aircraft or rough roads that stretched for miles through unforgiving terrain. On paper, Jonestown looked like a dream. Members could farm together, everyone would work, everyone would eat, everyone would contribute. No poverty, no racism, no greed. At least that was the promise. The reality was very different. Life began before sunrise. Residents worked long hours clearing land, planting crops, cooking meals, building structures, and maintaining the settlement. The tropical heat was relentless. Food was often scarce, and many former residents later described being constantly hungry. Even after exhausting work days, people weren't always allowed to rest. At night, loudspeakers mounted throughout the settlement, broadcasting Jim Jones's voice for hours. His speeches were echoed through the jungle. Sometimes they lasted late into the night. He spoke about enemies, government conspiracies, the media, former members who had left. Anyone who questioned him became part of the story he told, that dangerous forces were trying to destroy the community. Over time, many residents became increasingly isolated from the outside world. Letters home were monitored. Phone calls were limited. Some families later reported receiving letters that sounded unlike the loved ones they remembered, raising concerns that people felt pressure to present life in Jonestown as happy and successful. Former members who managed to leave later described an atmosphere where fear and loyalty became deeply intertwined. One of the most unsettling practices reported by survivors became known as white nights. Residents would suddenly be awakened, sometimes in the middle of the night, and told that enemies were closing in. Everyone would gather. Children, parents, grandparents, entire families. Jones would describe an imminent attack or invasion. In some of these drills, members were handed cups containing liquid and told it was poison. They were instructed to drink as a demonstration of complete loyalty. Only afterwards would they be told that it was a test. The poison wasn't real this time. Each drill reinforced the same message. Your loyalty must come before everything else, even your own life. Months passed. Concern began growing back in the United States. Relatives of Jonestown residents struggled to contact their loved ones. Some believed family members were held against their will. Others worried that the letters they were receiving from Guyana sounded rehearsed. These concerns eventually reached members of Congress. One name, in particular, would become central to the story. Congressman Leo Ryan of California. Unlike many officials who relied solely on reports, Ryan believed in seeing situations firsthand. In November 1978, he traveled to Guyana with a small delegation that included journalists, government staff, and several concerned family members. Their goal was simple: find out what was really happening inside Jonestown. When the delegation arrived, Jim Jones welcomed them. At first, everything appeared surprisingly normal. Residents smiled, children played, music filled the air. Visitors were shown neatly arranged buildings and community gatherings. Jones wanted the delegation to see a thriving settlement, but appearances can be carefully managed. As the first visit continued, small cracks began to show. One resident quietly slipped a note to a journalist. The message was brief. It essentially asked for help getting people out. The delegation soon learned that there were others who also wanted to leave. That changed everything, because for the first time, Jim Jones was facing something he could no longer fully control. Imagine following someone you believe could change the world. You leave your home, move to a jungle thousands of miles away, cut off your family, and trust one man with every decision. Then one day, he tells you that dying together is the only way to prove your loyalty. More than 900 people never came home. This is the story of Jonestown. For the first time since arriving in Jonestown, Congressman Leo Ryan and his delegation realized that not everyone wanted to stay. One by one, residents quickly approached members of the visiting group. Some whispered, some waited until no one was looking. Others passed handwritten notes folded into tiny pieces of paper. Their message was simple: please help us leave. For years, these individuals had lived in isolation. Many feared that even asking to leave could bring severe consequences. Now, with outsiders finally present, they saw what might be their only chance. As word spread throughout the settlement, the atmosphere changed. The smiles that had greeted the delegation began to disappear. Tensions settled over Jonestown. Supporters of Jim Jones argued that anyone wanting to leave had been manipulated by outsiders. Others remained silent, unsure whom they should trust. Jones himself appeared increasingly exhausted. Witnesses described him as physically frail and emotionally strained. His speeches wandered, and he frequently returned to the idea that powerful enemies were trying to destroy everything he had built. The following day, several residents officially asked to leave with Congressman Ryan. Ryan agreed. No one would be forced. Anyone wishing to return to the United States could accompany the delegation, but not everyone accepted that decision. Before the group departed, a temple member attacked Congressman Ryan with a knife. Ryan was not seriously injured, and the delegation continued toward the nearby Port Kaituma airstrip. There, a small aircraft waited to take everyone home. Some who had chosen to leave believed the hardest part was over. It wasn't. As passengers prepared to board the planes, a tractor pulling a trailer arrived at the airstrip. Inside were armed members of the People's Temple. Without warning, the gunfire erupted. People scattered across the runway. Some tried to take cover behind the aircraft. Others ran into nearby fields. The attack lasted only minutes. When it ended, Congressman Leo Ryan had been killed, along with the journalist Dawn Harris, NBC cameraman Bob Brown, photographer Greg Robertson, and Temple member Patricia Parks. Several others were seriously wounded. Leo Ryan became the only sitting member of the United States Congress ever killed while carrying out official duties. News of the attack soon would reach the outside world, but back in Jonestown, events were moving even faster. Later that day, Jim Jones gathered the community together. Audio recordings recovered from after the tragedy captured portions of what happened next. Historians also refer to one of these recordings as the death tapes. On the recording, Jones tells the community that their future is gone. He claims hostile forces will soon arrive. He insists there is only one path left. Not everyone agreed. One woman, Christine Miller, questioned the decision. She argued that there had to be another way. She argued people to think about the children. It was one of the few moments captured on the recording where someone openly challenged Jones. But her objections were overruled. The meeting continued. The atmosphere became increasingly desperate, and what followed would become one of the darkest chapters in modern history. More than 900 people died at Jonestown on November 18, 1978. Among them were over 300 children. Investigators later determined that the deaths occurred under complex and tragic circumstances. While many adults died after ingesting a cyanide-laced drink, survivor testimony and later investigations indicated that many children had no meaningful choice. And historians continue to discuss the extent of which fear, corrosion, and control shaped the adults' action. When Guyanese officials and investigators arrived, they were confronted with a scene unlike anything they ever encountered. The settlement had once been promoted as a utopian community was silent. Homes stood empty, meals remained unfinished, personal belongings lay exactly where they had been left. The dream that had drawn hundreds of people into the jungle had ended in unimaginable loss. News of the tragedy spread around the world almost immediately. At first, many reports underestimated what had happened. Some believed only a handful of people had died. As investigators continued counting, the number kept rising. 100, 300, 500, and then more. By the end of the investigation, officials confirmed that more than 900 people had lost their lives, including over 300 children. It remains one of the deadliest single losses of American civilian life in a non-natural disaster before the events of September 11, 2001. Investigators recovered journals, letters, photographs, cassette tapes, and thousands of pages of documents. Those reports help historians reconstruct the final years of the People's Temple. One thing became painfully clear. Very few people had traveled to Guyana expecting tragedy. Most had gone searching for something hopeful. Many people wanted racial equality. Some wanted a stronger sense of community. Others were looking for purpose, belonging, and a better future for their families. Those hopes were slowly manipulated, not overnight, not in one dramatic moment, but little by little. Experts who study coercive groups often describe this process as gradual. Trust grows first, isolation increases, outside voices become harder to hear. Loyalty becomes tied to identity, and questioning the leader begins to feel like questioning yourself. By the time many members recognized the danger, leaving had become far more difficult than anyone had imagined. Only a small number of people survived Jonestown. Some escaped into the jungle before the final events unfolded. Others happened to be away from the settlement that day. Many spent years speaking publicly about what they had experienced, hoping that sharing their stories might help prevent similar tragedies in the future. For those families who lost loved ones, however, there was no easy answers. Only memories, only questions, only the difficult task of understanding how a place built on promises of hope became a site of an unmanageable loss. Today, the settlement itself has largely disappeared. The jungle reclaimed much of the land. Nature continued moving forward, but history did not forget. Nearly 5 decades later, Jonestown remained one of the most studied group examples of how charisma, manipulation, isolation, and absolute power can combine with devastating consequence. Its story isn't remembered because people were foolish. It's remembered because they were human. People searching for purpose, for belonging, for someone they believe they could trust. And that may be the most unsettling part of it all. Because if history teaches us anything, it's that manipulation rarely begins with fear. It often begins with hope. This has been Wildly Unhinged. The people in this story were real. The events you heard tonight are based on documented historical records and survivor testimony. If you enjoyed this episode, there are many more unbelievable stories waiting to be told. Until next time, don't look, just listen.